This story will sound very much like the lurid tales of body snatching you see in the headlines at the supermarket checkout line. You're about to meet people who say they've been abducted by aliens. Virtually nobody believes them, but the exception is significant. He's a professor at the Harvard Medical School. Here's John Scott.
Nighttime is not an easy time. There's always a sense of fear, not knowing what's going to happen.
Mary Oscarson is a serious woman with a serious job, data management in the defense industry. She also has a serious problem.
It is not any easier for me today to accept or acknowledge them when I see them than it was 10, 20 years ago.
A look around her room gives you an idea who she's referring to. Aliens. Visitors from some other place who, she says, have been calling on her, even abducting her, since she was a child. Impossible, you say? Well, Mary's convinced.
Why would someone risk their career, their life, their friends, their family, everything that people work hard for? Why would they do that unless it were true?
And Mary isn't the only true believer. Over and over again, respectable, successful people told us they've been the victims of abductions. And their drawings and descriptions of those responsible are strangely similar. Creatures with large heads and huge dark eyes, who usually appear in the middle of the night and often perform sinister medical experiments.
It then went from the white light hitting me to then being paralyzed to being floated out of my room, going up into a spaceship, lying on a table.
I was aware that they were putting an instrument in my neck, right here.
I've had eggs removed from my ovaries repeatedly.
One other thing that Mary and these other true believers have in common: they are all patients of one man, a psychiatrist with a considerable reputation who's willing to stake it on the notion that close encounters with aliens are part of our everyday lives. He is Dr. John Mack, a Pulitzer Prize-winning biographer and professor at one of the most prestigious institutions on earth, Harvard University. Mack says he was a skeptic at first.
I rejected it. It didn't make any sense in my reality.
But Mack says he became convinced after encountering dozens of the people he now calls abductees.
What will happen is that I'll be laying down on the bed, and whichever direction I'm facing, they will be behind me every time.
I've spent now thousands of hours with these individuals. I simply have not been able to discover any way to even remotely begins to account for this other than the thing itself, whatever it is.
Are you saying that aliens from outer space or some other place are actually abducting human beings?
The fact is that people who are reliable witnesses are speaking with great emotion, conviction about experiences that are like that.
David Jones is one of the patients who came to Dr. Mack a couple of years ago with stories about aliens. Back in 1956, he was finishing up his evening chores on his family's farm in southwest Missouri when he says a face like this appeared on the wall of his house.
It was like a Halloween face. The terrifying part was how it looked at me, how its look penetrated me, and it was just horrifying.
He was a frightened first grader back then. Now he's a successful health insurance executive. But he says visits from aliens remain a disturbing part of his life.
They put you in this trance which you cannot be mobile. You have no control of your feelings or what you're experiencing. So they have free will to do whatever they wish.
You said they did things to you that hurt, such as?
Well, such as taking semen at their own will, not at my will, poking and prodding, taking skin samples. And what was amazing, they take skin samples out of your arm. It doesn't even bleed.
Is that what that is right there?
That's what this is, right here, from a past time, yeah.
Partially awake and partially still asleep. In other words, it's waking dreams.
Psychologist Robert Baker has been looking into UFOs and abduction stories for 26 years. He says there's nothing alien about the experiences David and Mary describe, that they're hallucinations made real by a common disorder called sleep paralysis, an inability to fully wake up. So people who experience this, their bodies are in effect shut down, but their minds are awake.
That's right. That's why the feeling of floating occurs. And there is a restricted amount of oxygen going up to the brain. And this reduced oxygen to the brain is what causes so many of the abductees to talk about sexual rape, sexual stimulation, genital stimulation, and so on.
Is sleep paralysis a possible explanation for the stories they tell you?
There is an element of paralysis occurring here, but they're not asleep, number one. And even if that were occurring, that would only account for the paralysis. It wouldn't account for the entire other 99.9% of the experience.
But Dr. Baker argues Dr. Mack only works with patients who are convinced they've had alien encounters and that he never challenges them. It seems that you are working to get these people to accept their experiences as fact on some plane. Is that fair?
Yeah, this has an emotional reality that for them that and I haven't any way to explain it otherwise.
But does Dr. Mack even consider other possibilities?
Now, what happened then when they took you back in the ship? What?
David Jones went to Dr. Mack for a hypnosis session which Dateline was invited to record. Jones wanted to remember a night in 1980. It was 4 a.m. and his young daughter was ill in the hospital. Jones was resting on a couch nearby and says he later realized there were 40 minutes he could not account for that night.
That's all right. Let the feelings come. Remember, you came through this fine, Dave. You're okay.
Through hypnosis, Dr. Mack takes David back 14 years. Jones seems to recall being taken to a spaceship.
I'm remembering what they did to me. I don't want them doing that to her. And I just swore, don't touch her, don't take her, don't do those things to her.
Throughout the session, Dr. Mack seems to assume that the aliens were actually there.
He didn't communicate anything to you about why you were taken back into the ship.
I just remember being able to see that light again.
Mm-hmm. The light in the ship or someplace else? You mean the experience with these beings adds to ourselves, our world? Is that what you're saying?
During the session, Dr. Mack never asks whether Jones might have fallen asleep and been dreaming.
And so I admire your courage in taking it on.
Mack has turned 13 cases like David's into a book he titled Abduction. But stories of encounters with fantastic creatures are nothing new. For thousands of years, people have sworn that demons, fairies, and something from the Middle Ages called an incubus came to them while they slept. Critics of Dr. Mack say, look at some recent books and popular films, and you'll see a remarkable resemblance to the aliens his patients describe.
I call these little grays Spielbergs because that's where they came from.
But if they come out of a hypnosis session or a regression,
yeah,
doesn't that stamp them as being accurate memories?
No. Hypnosis itself is nothing except turning on the individual's imagination. It's almost impossible to tell fact from fiction.
Facts are what everyone is looking for, and critics say there's no hard evidence to support Dr. Mack's theories, only assertions like David Jones's scars and a tape recording Mary Oscarson played for us. She says she was sleeping alone in her house one night when she may have captured the commands of one of her visitors on a voice-activated tape recorder.
And when I woke up, I decided to rewind my tape. And the next thing I heard on that tape were 3 distinct sounds. The third thing is a robotic sounding voice saying, "Don't wake up."
Dateline took the tape to the audio engineers at NBC, who amplified it and took out background noise. This is how it sounds. Listen again. Do you hear any words?
We don't have any respectable physical evidence that any reliable scientist, any reputable scientist would respect.
The large majority of people that are confronted with this, they're open to it. They don't know. They're willing to go along on that ride with me of I don't know, which is all I'm asking.
Well, we don't know about alien abduction, but a new Dateline poll shows that many people do believe there is life on other planets or in other solar systems. 43% of those responding said yes, 42% said no, and 15% weren't sure. The numbers of believers were higher among men and college graduates.